On the 28th of April 1945, one of the most influential men of the 20th century met his end at the hands of partisans fighting against his rule. His corpse was desecrated, spat upon, and strung up for all to see. His rise and fall is one of the more remarkable stories, and is vital in understanding the march towards World War II. Benito Mussolini was the man who formed the first successful fascist party, and would provide a blueprint for those who would follow. In today's video, we will look at the rise of Mussolini, his actions in power, and the fall that led to his end. Benito Mussolini was born on the 29th of July 1883 in Predappio, northern Italy. His family were socialists, and whilst his parents had respectable jobs, they were poor. This was in large part due to his father spending too much money on women with whom he was having affairs. As a child, Benito was noted for his intelligence, his unruly nature, and his tendency to be violent with his peers. In 1903, Mussolini headed to Switzerland to avoid having to take part in national service. There, he spreads his revolutionary socialist messages and works for a socialist newspaper. He is arrested multiple times for agitating general strikes before returning to Italy in 1904. Upon his return, he is forced to join the army for 2 years before working as a teacher. In the early 1900s, Mussolini wrote much on the matter of socialism and led riots against Italy's war with the Ottoman Empire in Libya. But perhaps his most notable works at this time was his editorship at the socialist newspaper Avanti. In 1914, the First World War began. As the various powers declared war, Italy remained neutral. Mussolini, however, believed that through the war, the Italian people would realize the need for socialist revolution. Mussolini published a call for war in October of 1914, though most socialists were opposed to the war. Mussolini resigned as editor and was banished from the Socialist Party. On the 24th of May 1915, Mussolini got his wish, and Italy joined the First World War. He would be wounded during a training exercise, returning home no longer a socialist. Mussolini believed that the veterans of the First World War would form the basis for a revolutionary force. Combined with former socialists, anarchists, and republicans, Mussolini formed a new political force in Italy. He was backed by rural landowners, industrialists, and small business owners, those who feared the rise of socialism in post-war turmoil. The Fasci di Combattimento, or fighting bands as they were known, took inspiration from the old Roman fasces, a tied bundle of sticks and a symbol of unity in purpose. With a uniform of black shirts, armed with all manner of weapons, the fascists were born, Mussolini gaining the moniker Il Duce. The combination of Mussolini's oratory skills and the black shirt violence proved an effective combination. His black shirt organization would not only engage in violence, but also humiliate leading socialists, taking photographs of the punishments inflicted. Union leaders and socialists were murdered whilst Mussolini gave speeches pushing the strength of the Italian people, the weakness of the socialists, and pushing what could be achieved under a strong leader. In 1921, Mussolini solidified the various fasces under the Fascist political party. By this time, the party had grown to boast a membership of over 300,000. In May of the very same year, Mussolini was elected to the Italian parliament. In August of 1922, a general strike was called by the socialists, not for any material change, but for an end to fascist violence. This presented Mussolini with the opportunity he needed. He was able to frame the strike as a direct threat to the country, and that the current government was incapable of dealing with the situation. The fascists occupied several key buildings, such as post offices and train stations. On the 25th of October 1922, Mussolini gave a speech indicating his desire to take power, appointing 4 of his closest comrades to lead a march on Rome. Meanwhile, Mussolini made contact with the leaders of the Catholic Church, industry, and the monarchists to ensure that this was not some violent revolution. He was keen to obtain power through legal means, whilst being the only person who could put an end to the fascist violence. The government resigned, but not before instigating martial law, allowing the army to be deployed against the fascists. While some 30,000 fascists marched into Rome on the 28th of October, Mussolini was in Milan waiting to see if the military would be deployed. The Italian king Emmanuel III refused to sign the order to deploy the troops and instead handed over power to Mussolini on the 29th of October. It was at this point that Mussolini made his way to Rome to accept his new position as Prime Minister. Mussolini sought to establish himself as the dictator of Italy. He gradually consolidated power and ensured he alone would have control. One of his critics was a leading socialist named Giacomo. When he spoke out against Mussolini, he was kidnapped and brutally beaten to death by the Blackshirts. After this, no further member of parliament would speak up against the fascists. Mussolini confirmed close ties with the Catholic Church, seeing the need for strong support from them. He sought to eradicate literacy within both Italy whilst altering the curriculum to indoctrinate the youth into supporting a strong leader. The National After-Work Programme was established to give workers recreational activities, which saw an increase in the likes of libraries, leisure centres and cinemas. Elections were abolished, political parties banned, and a special tribunal established to deal with those considered subversive. Political opponents were exiled or sentenced to death. Mussolini sought to present himself as almost superhuman, a prime example of manhood. He often arranged propaganda films of him working on the land or engaging in sport. He asserted that he would work through the night. He left the light on in his office, proving his hard work. Even his speeches were said to cure deafness akin to Catholic miracles. In reality, Mussolini went to bed well before the lights were turned off, and it's unlikely his speeches cured deafness. He presented himself as a devoted family man with his wife Rochelle. In reality, Mussolini had left his first wife and child in 1915 to be with Rochelle, the 16-year-old daughter of his father's new lover. Mussolini had both his first wife and son sent to an asylum to avoid any embarrassment to his image, though they died shortly thereafter. Whilst Mussolini was able to achieve complete control within Italy, writing the blueprint for further dictators, Italy was still lacking one thing when compared to its rival European powers. Italy had long been considered the lesser of the European powers. As it did not hold much in the way of colonial holdings, Mussolini sought to create a new Roman Empire, seeking to control the Mediterranean. In North Africa, Mussolini brutally suppressed rebellions in what is now modern-day Libya, using forced marches, chemical weapons, and concentration camps. It is thought that anywhere from 50 to 70,000 men, women, and children were killed. In Abyssinia, modern-day Ethiopia, Mussolini sought to address a humiliation inflicted upon Italy's colonial ambitions when the African nation resisted occupation in the late 19th century. Mussolini unleashed the full force of his modern army against the under-equipped Abyssinians, again using chemical weapons. We do have a video on the Abyssinian crisis for those who wish to explore the topic further. But perhaps the most relevant of Italy's foreign engagements was during the Spanish Civil War. The Spanish Civil War saw both Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy intervene on the side of Franco's nationalists. It was a display to the rest of the world the military might of Nazi Germany and Italy, as well as displaying the horrors of modern warfare. It crucially showed Mussolini and Hitler growing ever closer. Throughout the early 1930s, the rest of Europe had hoped that Mussolini would be able to check against Hitler's plans of expansion. Plans to appease Mussolini with a lack of consequence for the invasion of Abyssinia proved fruitless. Hitler had long admired Mussolini for his rise to power. At first, Mussolini was not particularly impressed with Hitler, referring to him as a silly little clown. But as Hitler grew the Nazi war machine, Mussolini began to realize that he would be the junior partner in any relationship with Germany. In May of 1939, Mussolini and Hitler confirmed their alliance with a Pact of Steel, tying the country's military. Seeing the weakness of Britain and France in the face of Italy and Germany's annexations, Mussolini was all but assured of his dream of a new Roman Empire. Nevertheless, when Hitler invaded Poland on the 1st of September 1939, Mussolini did not immediately declare war. He was still waiting to see whether Britain and France would offer him territory in the Mediterranean, but when it became clear that France would fall, Mussolini entered the war on the side of Germany on the 10th of June. Unlike Nazi Germany, however, Italy was not prepared for war. The Italian army struggled in North Africa against the British. and were unable to defeat a greatly outnumbered Greek army. The Nazi military would often prop up their Italian allies, to the point where Hitler initially wanted no Italian soldiers taking part in the invasion of the Soviet Union. Mussolini, however, was keen to ensure Italian participation, leading to the deaths of around 80,000 Italian soldiers. In Yugoslavia, thousands were summarily executed or detained in concentration camps. The taking of civilian hostages and their subsequent executions was used to deter partisans. Retaliatory attacks on civilians were common where the Italian military took losses. 1943 saw the beginning for the end of Mussolini. The Axis powers were defeated in North Africa, and the United States had entered the war against Italy, and the island of Sicily was invaded. The Allied forces were bombing the Italian mainland, including the capital of Rome. Mussolini's government could see the end was near, and passed a vote of no confidence, which included his own son-in-law voting against him. The king deposed Mussolini in July of 1943, and Mussolini was detained in an isolated mountain retreat. The new Italian Prime Minister sought to end the war, but Germany was not prepared to give over Italy so easily. Germany invaded and divided the country into two, forming the Republic of Salo in the north. In a daring raid, Nazi soldiers rescued Mussolini and installed him as a puppet ruler of the newly formed state. Mussolini was brought before Hitler, who insisted he must execute the traitors who deposed him, resulting in the execution of his son-in-law. Mussolini attempted to paint the defeat of Italy on his generals, whose advice he regularly ignored, and on Italian Jews. Mussolini ordered the deportation of around 6,000 Italian Jews to Auschwitz. As the Nazis ran the new republic, Mussolini was kept under house arrest, his power extinguished. When the occupying Nazi forces were defeated with the collapse of the republic, Mussolini attempted to flee to Spain with his mistress, Cloretta Petacci. Mussolini attempted to flee by car and truck with his entourage of loyalists and German guards. He attempted to disguise himself as a German soldier. Mussolini's convoy was stopped by a small group of Italian partisans who forced the fleeing dictator's men to surrender after a short firefight. The partisans were prepared to let the Germans go if they promised to hand over the Italians amongst them. When the partisans searched the convoy, they noticed a suspicious-looking Mussolini attempting to hide. He was pulled from the truck without any interference from the German guards. Mussolini was detained by the partisans until it was decided that he was to be executed by Italians, not captured by the Allies. He was taken to the Villa Belmonte, where he was executed by firing squad, along with his mistress and several other fascist captives. The bodies were loaded onto a truck and driven to Milan. Mussolini's body was beaten, spat upon, and kicked by the crowds that gathered. His corpse was strung up to the roof of a petrol station for all to see. We cannot show the images of Mussolini's body on YouTube, as it is incredibly gruesome. His body was beaten beyond recognition. To say his face was rearranged is an understatement. The images are widely available on Google, and they are very easy to find. Mussolini sought to create a new Roman Empire and a new form of authoritarian rule. With a mix of charisma, political oppression, and black-shirt violence, he was able to take control of a fractured country. His ambitions and arrogance resulted in a series of decisions that led Italy to play second fiddle to Hitler's Germany. Mussolini's legacy is one of failed wars and the formation of one of the most destructive ideologies of the 20th century.